Again, the online fertility tool, first of all, and most importantly, it's not a recommendation tool. Your crop consultant, your fertilizer dealer, your management team for your farm will build the recommendation. What we built this tool to do is to help you to schedule fertility. Now that you have this awesome delivery mechanism called a drip system, how do I use that to schedule my nutrients? So it's a scheduling tool, not a recommendation tool. Again, the background or the bones or the skeleton of the tool is the University of Illinois uptake charts. Steve has used them. I'm going to show you a couple of them here in a second, just to kind of remind you of how we built the uptake, and the scheduling mechanism is based on the uptake chart. When does that plant want to eat what nutrient? Nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, whatever. When does it want to eat it? At what quantity does it want to eat it? That's what we based the scheduling tool on. So the goal, and you'll see this as we get into the tool, the goal is to stay 20% ahead of need. That's green on the tool. We want to keep you in the green. So 20% or more on the tool is green. Yellow or white is between 10 and 20% ahead of need, and less than 10% is red. So we want to stay in the green, and part of it is what some of the discussion that we've already had. Is the nutrient immediately available? It's not immediately available, so the 20% gives us a little bit of a buffer. Just because we apply it in the soil, does that mean that the roots are right there to eat it up, drink it up through the soil water? No, not necessarily. That's why we built in the 20% buffer. So that's why the buffer is. So again, take home, stay in the green. You'll be a better off if you stay in the green versus the other. And you'll understand that a little better as we go through the tool itself. Economics wasn't considered in the tool. So what I mean by that is I can front load a whole bunch of fertilizer, dry fertilizer up front. I can front load all that, and it'll cost me less. But is that as available to the plant as a application through the drip system? A lot of cases, and there's a lot of data that's suggesting that delivering those nutrients just in time will give you a better return on investment. The liquid fertilizer that you're delivering right through that soil water is more available, so it may be 2, 3, 4 times more available than the dry stuff that you put out way early. So it's a balance between that. What we're looking at is the agronomic best case. The economic best case is something that you'll have to work with your fertilizer guy and decide how much do I put up front, how much do I put through my system. The scheduling tool, what the scheduling tool will help us to do is to not get behind. I never want to get behind. That's what the tool's goal is. And again, the tool we moved online last year. We had it as an Excel grid, and you had to have the version on your computer, and you had to be in your office, and so on and so forth. We moved it to online, and you can start switching to the online now. We moved it to online for a couple of reasons. Number one, you can play around with it on your iPad in your pickup or wherever. You can do it at your fertilizer dealer's office, your crop consultant's office. You can give those other guys access to it, so you can be visiting with your crop consultant on the phone, and you can both be looking at it online together. So you can have conversations to see, how am I doing on my scheduling? Do I need to do something different? So there's some advantages to doing it online. The other thing that we like about the online tool is the fact that if we have a new version, if we want to change an algorithm or change something or improve it, we can do that immediately. Then it goes to everywhere. We don't have the old version running around with a bunch of guys and they didn't update it, they forgot to update it, and you don't have the most up-to-date version. So we have it online so that everybody's working off the most up-to-date version. So does that all make sense? So here we are at the corn fertility tool. So we're going to go to projects. That's the home page, projects. Okay, I've front loaded some projects already. And so you can have more than one project in here. We're going to use this Wolf demo as a project. And if you want to put in a new project, you click new project, and then you can add in the name and the zip code. The zip code's important because the nutrient uptake and growth of a corn crop is based on growing degree units. So the growing degree units at your zip code is the driver mechanism or the engine for the uptake. So if you put in your zip code, it will look at a 10-year average of growing degree units through the season when you build a plan this time of the year, and then as you go through this season, it will use actual growing degree units for this season, so you get actual for the uptake. So you have 10-year average to kind of build a plan, and then in season it'll actually collect. And this is fully automated in the background. You don't have to do anything. It's all done automatically. So your zip code's important, and then you can have different versions of this if you want to build for different fields or whatever. So that's how you do that. So in order to build this, you do new project, and you put this in, and then hit the green button. That's edit share. And then it rolls into the input screen. So the input screen, we've got the info, which was the first screen, that we're in the input screen now, and there's two other screens as part of the tool. The input screen, we can enter in our yield goal for crop. We can either type it in or we can hit this and then go up and down. So maybe go down a couple, so we've got 295 or 300 or whatever, wherever you want to be. And then efficiency, I didn't talk about efficiency. I'm sure a lot of you guys, when you talked about buying a drip system, is it more efficient with water? Yes, it is. Is it more efficient with nutrients? Yes, it is. So we built in, if you want to play around with efficiencies, we can change the efficiency to, we're basing this example on 100%. So whatever the uptake was in the uptake charts from University of Illinois, that's 100%. If we want to say that we're at 10% better efficiency, we would put it at 90%. So you can play around with that. We're going to leave it at 100. The growing degree unit, you enter it at planting or emergence. For here, we use planting. Put in the date of 1st of May, and the maturity of the hybrid, we're using 105 days. This is my home farm, like we talked about, it's in South Dakota, north of Sioux Falls. 105 days, a full season hybrid for us. So anything that you changed here, you have to hit the update button. So let's hit update there. So the next thing we'll do is pre-plant. We're gonna build what we have up front. What is existing in the soil, and what am I going to put down in either broadcast, or what am I going to put down with my planter as a starter? Or the third thing we can do is a credit for if I'm after soybeans or after alfalfa, after a legume crop, or if I add any manure, any litter, or anything like that. I can enter all those things, so I've got a starting point to where I'm going to go. So let's plug in some numbers. So and my soil test, let's leave nitrogen at 0. Let's go to phosphorus and say we've got 30 pounds of phos. Potassium, we got 90 pounds of potassium. Yep, 90. Sulfur, let's say 15. Mag, 20. Zinc, 10. Boron, 2. Manganese, 1. Calcium, 1. So that gives me what my soil test 2, boron 1, manganese 1, calcium 1, and credits. Let's say we're corn after corn, so we're not going to do any credits. So now we have to hit update. Okay. Once that updates, scroll down to the bottom. Okay, it's telling me for what I'm looking at, I need a seasonal nutrient uptake, grow 300 bushel corn based on the uptake charts of about 330 pounds of nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, so on and so forth. For my yield goal, that's what I'm going to need nutrient-wise, from what's in the soil, from what I put down early, from what I'm going to add later on. So now let's scroll back up, and we'll go to the weather chart. Hit this 3 lines right here. Just click on that once, and it'll give me a different view. So I have this chart right here and the chart that we built up front. So the stuff that we put on up front, broadcast with my planner starter, everything, all the stuff that we have up front is credited right here. So again, what does green say? I'm ahead. I'm ahead of needs by how far? Everybody remember? 20, very good. 20% ahead of needs. So I'm pretty good shape until about we're in July 10th, so we're still up here. We're still in good shape. So let's add another 60 here. What happened? We're past that rapid uptake chart, or that rapid uptake part, and all of a sudden adding 60 pounds bought us a whole bunch. So we could back that down. Let's go 30 and see what happens. So that backed us down. It bought us a couple of weeks, but we're putting on half as much. So what we can do with this chart, knowing that nitrogen can be lost, leached out, we're going to stay ahead of its needs by 20%, but I'm not going to pour it all on out front and take the risk that I could lose it with a big rain event. You follow me? Does that make sense? Do the same thing with the other nutrients. Let's play around with phosphorus. So we're running out around the 10th of July. So let's go right around the 19th, and let's say we're going to add 10. Let's see what happens with 10. Bought us a week. Back up and let's do 20 instead of 10. So I bought a little bit more so we can jump down, and then let's do another 20. And so on and so forth. You kind of get the idea. So how the guys have been using this tool are using it, and I think the most effectively is build a plan this time of the year, have a preseason plan. It's a little bit like a baseball game. I have my pregame plan, and I've got my roster all built, and I've got everybody in the right positions, and everything happens. Well, in the second inning of the baseball game, something happens. The other team scores 8 runs or whatever happens. We can make some in-game changes with this tool, and as long as we know that we're staying ahead, that we're winning the score, we're still winning in the score, as long as we know that, and staying in the green, then we're in good shape. Does that make sense? So to wrap this up, I've got a couple more things I need to talk about in a short amount of time. To wrap this up, this will be available. It'll be an online tool to NetFM customers. If you have a NetFM drip system, you'll have access to this. We'll work closely with your dealer, which will be Kurt NutriDrip, his team, and we'll work closely with your dealer. And again, you'll have access, and you can grant access to others, but only one of you will be able to change. The other ones will be able to view it, but somebody won't be able to go in there and change all your numbers. If, your crop consultant or whoever, there'll only be one of you that will be able to do the changing. So, and there'll be an administrative level, and that's what we're working on right now. That's why we couldn't roll it out to you today. We're still working on the administrative levels, that sort of thing. But this is an online tool. This will be free to your NetFM, you guys as NetFM customers, because we want you to help you to schedule your nutrients. That's what the goal is. So, questions about this? Let's roll back to the, yeah. That's boron, yes. Yeah, we didn't have Molly last year on this because we don't have a Molly uptake chart. So until we get a Molly uptake chart, we won't be able to add that. And that'll be something that we'll be adding. And like we said, we'll be able to add that, and then you'll have that version immediately. Yeah, we're in good shape with boron because of what we put on up front. It doesn't take a lot. Like Kurt mentioned when he was talking about boron, it doesn't take a lot, but staying ahead of its needs. So the best place to add boron is, again, up front in a micro pack at starter time. The other time that a lot of guys will see an impact of boron is right prior to tassel time. When the plant is building the silks and the tassel, it uses a lot of boron at that time. So a lot of guys will throw a little bit of boron in, either through their drip system or some other way maybe. But we prefer you put it through your drip system right prior to tassel. I think that, Kurt's, it's such a small amount. A micro pack of Molly is probably a great way to start with that one. Other questions? We aren't. We're figuring that your soil test will give that, but we have, if you're at 5% organic matter versus 1% organic matter, we're not dealing with that with this tool. We're just strictly doing what do you have up front, what you're comfortable that you have up front, and if you want to credit yourself some nitrogen as it breaks down and becomes available, you can do that, in any way, but we're not doing it automatically. Was that your question? Okay. Yeah. Sorry. Sorry, not you, this guy. Yeah. It doesn't. Okay, what the question is if I get a huge rain event and I have some leaching, does this tool factor that in? And the answer is no. That this tool is built purely on the uptake. That's why we're doing tissue sampling. You know, this is going to give us a game plan, but having tissue samples will keep us out of the ditch if we have a rain event, or if there's something, just because I put the nutrient in the soil doesn't necessarily mean it's in the plant. So I tissue test to be sure that it's in the plant. So to answer your question, no, the tool doesn't do that, but with tissue testing, we can monitor that. So, yeah.
Where do you account for any nitrogen in the water?
Yeah, the tool isn't designed to do that, but if you want to, we could do that in the uptake or the input page. Let's go back to that input page. This will kind of answer a couple of your guys' questions. So scroll back up. Yeah. So we could, if we want to say, okay, I know I'm going to get 30 pounds of nitrogen through the year with my water, you can add that as a credit there if you would like. I mean, you can do that, but it's not this version, and all the questions that you guys are asking could potentially be future versions that we'll be able to update and access some of that ability. So you can do it, but it's a kind of backwards. It's not automatic like what we would like to have. Great question. Any other questions? Okay, again, you'll have access to it. You'll be able to play with it. If you have questions, work with NutriDrip team and myself. So let's go now past. Yeah, we talked about these. This is where it's built based on the uptake charts. So go ahead and go past. There's one that I wanted to. The next slide I wanted to spend just a minute or two on. This is potassium. This is a little bit different way to look at potassium. You know, we looked at it in other charts. It's very steep, but this one I like because it was kind of a slap in the face to me as when do I need to time when I need to put my potassium on if I'm low. There's two uptake peaks, one around V4, V5, and there's a huge one between V8 and silk. So I need to be sure these uptakes are 14 pounds a day of potassium on 400 bushel corn. And we've heard that already stated, but this visual really shows me that, hey, when do I got to be paying attention to my potassium? There's a little peak here. This is the big rock. So, okay, let's go next. I guess I can run it now, can't I? So, okay. So that's okay. I should be running it myself rather than hollering at you. So I want to talk about two other quick topics that Kurt asked me to cover. Again, I'm the one standing in between you and lunch, so I'm going to slip through these relatively quickly. And then if you have questions, we can talk about it at lunch or pull me aside, or I'm happy to stay up here and talk, but I don't want to slow you down from lunch. So the two topics, one of them, both of them are based on sensors. One of them is based on plant sensors, and that's the one I'm going to talk about first. The second one is soil sensors or soil probes. The first one I want to talk about is the lessons that we learned from the smart field sensors. What's a smart field sensor? It's a temperature sensor of the plant that measures the plant temperature as compared to the air temperature or the ambient temperature. And why is that important? Well, we know that the ideal temperature for corn is around 85, 86 degrees. So above that temperature, and do you guys get above 85, 86 degrees here in Kansas? We certainly do, don't we? We do everywhere. So above that temperature, how does the plant deal with the stress that relates to that temperature? And how can we help, by scheduling our irrigation, help the plant to deal with that heat stress? So that's why we got into using the sensors. A couple of background items. The USDA started this effort about 20 years ago, and then the company that we're working for grabbed a hold of what USDA had done and now has its own algorithm. They're called Smart Field Stress Units, SSU. So in some of the charts that you're going to see here, it'll say SSU. And again, stress above 85 degrees in corn, it starts. So if it's at 105 or 110, how's the plant dealing with that? Soybeans, it starts at about 80. So what's our goals? Our goals with the algorithm that SmartField has given us is to stay below 1,500 SSUs or stress units. That's our goal. With corn, under 1,000 is even better. So what happened in 2017? There's a lot going on in this chart. I'm going to go through it relatively quickly, but what we have above here is the temperatures. Along here, and these are really small, 50 degrees up to 110 degrees is the ambient temperature. So during this calendar period, about the 10th of July through the 18th of July was a pretty warm week at this location. This location's in central South Dakota. We had a 110 degree day and a 105 degree day. So I pulled out the 105 degree day just to see what was going on. 105 degree ambient temperature. The plant temperature measured by the tool was around 88 degrees. We're doing a pretty good job of irrigating if we can keep the plant temperature, because how does the plant cool itself? It does the same thing as you and I do. It hydrates itself, it sweats. It transpires through the plant, pushes it out the top, cools itself. That's how it keeps it at 88 degrees. So on this particular day, doing a pretty decent job. So the SSU, or the Smart Field Stress Unit, was right about 1,500. So it reports once a day. So we had about 1,500 here. On this 110 degree day right here, I didn't highlight that, but 110 degrees was about 90 with the plant. Again, the plant was doing a nice job of cooling itself, and the stress units actually were really low that day. But the lesson that in this year, a couple slides ahead, I'm going to show you what a true difference was on the locations. So here's a location that's closer to us here in June 18th through 24th. And the same thing, it's the same algorithm. We have the ambient temperature and the plant temperature. There's not a lot of separation there, is there? We want to see separation. We're at about 90, here's about 95. There's not a lot of separation here. So there may be some improvement that we need to do with our irrigation to stay on top of it. But there's another issue going on here that we learned in 2017 that we didn't see in 2016, and that is the impact that we have with the humidity, relative humidity. So let's go back to those same two sites. In northeast Kansas was the 3 days that we looked at. The air temperature of 95, the canopy of 90. We had a very high stress unit, 2,700. What's our goal? Keeping it under 1,500. So we're above that 1,500. Our humidity was really high, 60% humidity on that day. Also in Kansas, the next day was 103. Our canopy temperature was 93. A lot of heat units again, relatively high on relative humidity, RH. Same thing on the 21st. We're above that. On a similar scenario up in South Dakota, a lot higher temperatures, but our canopy temperatures, we're doing a decent job of irrigating here, but here we're getting a lot more separation and a lot less stress units. What's the difference? The difference is right here. So 20, that 111 degree day that I showed you on the chart, and at 90 degrees plant temperature, we had 26% relative humidity. So the lesson that we learned this year was plant has to transpire, has to push water through itself to cool itself, but it has to have a way to exhaust the water out the top. On high relative humidity times, it's a lot more difficult for that plant to push it through the top in high humidity versus a low humidity. So there's the difference in the stress units. So what does that mean for irrigation or irrigation timing? We did a deep dive into about 3 different locations where we had these sensors and soil moisture, and we looked at irrigation timing. And the lesson, and this is 1 year of data, so we're hesitant to say this is for sure, but we like the trends. What we saw in the trends was when we were irrigating early in the day, and what I mean early in the day is prior to sunup through about 9, 10 o'clock in the morning, we were pre-hydrating that plant. In those areas of the field, we were dealing with the stress better than when we were irrigating immediately in the heat of the day. So we were more efficient with managing stress, pre-hydrating early versus middle of the day during the big heat. So knowing that you can't water your whole field all during that pre-sunup time frame, I think the take home here is rotate so you're not always watering the same zone at the same time of the day through these stress periods. Rotate your time of irrigation so one zone will get that prime time pre-hydration one day and then move it to another zone, and holistically you'll be better off than always irrigating the same time. You have the ability to do that with a drip system that you don't have with other types of irrigation. Overhead irrigation, you may get water on it today, and then it might be 3 or 4 days before I get another drink. So this isn't as, you can't deal with it as nicely as you can with this. So it was a nice lesson for us to understand pre-hydration. And the first time we were talking about this, one of the guys that were in the discussion was a marathon runner. And he said, this makes perfect sense. He said, when I'm running a marathon, if I pre-hydrate myself, I'm in a lot better shape and do a lot better job in my marathon than if I'm trying to drink while I'm running. So the same thing is true for us. That's true for the plant. Pre-hydrate as much as you can, especially during stressful times. Does that make sense? A neat lesson, and we were very frustrated. I have to tell you, we were very frustrated because we were getting really high stress units, and we're like, what are we doing wrong? We're irrigating the dickens out of this stuff. We're irrigating as hard as we can, but understanding the relative humidity component and the timing component, there's a lesson in it. So, make sense? Okay, I'm going to switch to one last thing. I'm getting into the dinner, so I'm going to talk a little bit about soil moisture probes. Where should I put my soil moisture probe? Kurt wanted me to talk a little bit about where do I put it within the field, number one, and secondly, where do I put my moisture probe relative to where the dripper line is and the crop line, the crop row is, and the actual dripper is. So this is a two-part question. So the soil survey, or the web soil survey, in my experience, and I've been doing variable rate prescriptions for 20 years, in my opinion, it's a decent predictor of the different soil types that are out in the field. It's a very poor predictor of where the soil changes. There are better ways to figure that out, and I'm going to show you a couple of maps of that. So topography yield maps, multiple year yield maps. If water is the limiting factor, multiple year of yield maps is a very powerful tool. Very powerful tool. Even better is EC, soil EC, or a Veris machine, or an EM38, which is similar to the Veris. This goes in the soil with discs that measure. The EM38 floats over top of the ground, but they both essentially tell us, predict water holding capacity of the soil. So what does that all mean? So here's two examples of a field. This is exactly the same field. On the left is the USDA soil survey. So we've got several different colors of soils. The blue soil in this soil survey is very good soil. The clay loam soil, very high water holding capacity, over 2 inches per foot of water holding capacity. Pretty darn good soil. Goes all the way down to the middle, kind of the gold color is about 1.5 inches per foot of water holding capacity, and the red is about 1 inch of water holding capacity per foot. So this holds about half as much water as this does on the soil survey. Again, I think it does a nice job of predicting this. What it does a poor job of is knowing where those soils are at. On the right-hand side is a culmination of a Veris layer and 5 years of yield information. There's a lot of power. So this is the red is the limited soil. That's the 1 inch per foot water holding capacity. So then it stacks out all the way to the 2 inches of water holding capacity. So this does a better job of predicting where the soils change. So if you didn't have this layer and you had this layer right here, where would you put the soil probe? Everybody always told us to put the soil probe in the primary soil type. So where would that be in that? What color would you be in? What's the primary soil type? The most soil on the soil map. Don't look at the right-hand side, look at just this one. Where do you put it? In the blue, don't you? So where at in the blue? So if I put it in the blue over here, I'd be in the right spot. But if I put it in the blue right in here, would that be predictive? So the point I'm trying to make is I love the USDA soil survey, but there are better ideas of where to put the probes. So in this field, where do we put the probes? We've got one in this soil type. We've got one in this soil type, one in this soil type. We got 3. So we've got one at the inch, 1 inch of water holding capacity, one at the 1.5 inch water holding capacity, and one at the 2 inch capacity. Make sense? So use your Veris, use your yield maps, use your topography. They're better predictors of where to put your probe within the yield, within the field. So what about, where do I put my soil moisture probe in reference to where the crop is, and in reference to where the dripper line is, and where the actual dripper is? So if this is the bubble right here of water and nutrients, and this is the roots, where they intersect or where they meet is an ideal spot to find where do I put my soil moisture probe. I want to see where that intersects. So if I move my soil moisture probe over right next to the dripper line, I would probably get in a lot higher water levels. If I put it in the row, which we do a lot with overhead irrigation, that's where this technology started. And when I put my first moisture probe in 7, 8 years ago, I put it right in between 2 plants. But with drip irrigation, my source is right here. If I put it over there, I'm probably going to get some artificially low numbers. With overhead irrigation, that works fine because I'm watering the entire canopy. So what about in reference to the drippers? So each of these bubbles is around a dripper. I want to find halfway in between two drippers. So what does that mean when I have to find my soil moisture probe? Guess what? I got to dig up and find out where my dripper line is, where my crop row is, and where my dripper is. And I put it halfway between 2 drippers, halfway between the dripper line and the crop row in this spot. So if you have this kind of a scenario where you've got a dripper line in every other row, you kind of know where to put it. But if you have your dripper lines at 40 inches and my crop is at 30, so I might have a dripper line here and I might have a dripper line over here, where do I put it then? Same kind of an equation. I need to find between two drippers, and I need to find an area that's probably 8, maybe 10 inches away from where the dripper line is. That's a good predictor. So the 8-inch rule away from the dripper line and near the crop row and in between two drippers is where our recommendation is. That makes sense? Questions about that? Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about irrigating and how do I use my soil moisture probe information to irrigate. So I need to define a couple of things first. This is a sand, a loam, and a silty clay loam, and we talked about, a little bit about that when we looked at that particular farm that we looked at a minute ago. But field capacity is the point at which the water is at full level. Additional water either runs off the field or leaches down through the profile. So field capacity is full. At wilting point, the plant cannot extract any more water out of it. There's a point in the middle, in each of these soil types, there's a point in the middle that's halfway down. And in our recommendation with your drip irrigation system, I want to operate in this top half. And the reason for that is this bottom water is still available water. This is defined as available water between field capacity and wilting point. It's all available, but the plant has to work a lot harder to get the bottom part of the available water. So because you can water every day or every other day with your drip system, I want to operate pretty close to field capacity. Again, you've got a unique opportunity with drip that you can apply water, so get it full and keep it full, or operate as close to field capacity as you can. Depending on your soil types, you've got less to work with, less available water to work with sand, so it's even more critical to apply water every day than it is in loam or clay loam, but the term or the idea, the rule of thumb is the same. Get it full and keep it full, close to field capacity. At Kansas State at Colby, Freddie Lamb talks about 85% of field capacity, or 85% of ET is where he likes to operate. Not all the way up on the line, because drip is a little bit more efficient. So on a soil moisture chart, what does that mean? What does that mean? So when I think about, okay, I know I want to operate close to field capacity. So when I look at my soil moisture chart, what do I want to look for? So when we build your chart, and most companies do this, there's several companies, but each of them will have a full line. And this chart, it's the blue line, and that would be near field capacity. It's not at field capacity, it's near field capacity. And near wilting point is the bottom line, that's the empty line. And in between those two lines is what we call the refill line. So I want to operate my irrigation system, whether it's a pivot or drip, in this between the full line and the refill line. Okay, this is like a road, and this is the shoulder of the road, and this is the middle of the road. I want to operate, and I want to drive right in this lane right here. With my vehicle, I want to operate right here. If I go over and over irrigate, I'm going to run in the ditch, and I'm going to have a wreck. Too much water is not good. If I cross the medium line, I'm going to still be alive, but I'm in the danger zone. So I want to operate from the middle line to the shoulder and operate my irrigation system here, irrigation, daily usage, daily usage, daily usage, another moisture event. Does that make sense? So whichever soil moisture probe company you have, most of them have this type of a readout that will give you information, operate between the refill line and the full line. With the Netafim system, we're going to be changing the full line and the refill line differently based on the size of the crop. So when you've got a crop that's at V6 and the root system is only as small as, only as big as maybe a softball or slightly bigger, I'm going to have to irrigate a little bit more aggressively to get the water to that. So we're going to only use the sensors near where the roots are at to build this scenario, refill to full line. And then as your root system gets bigger, then we'll expand and use different sensors. So we're going to be working through each growth stage and be changing that, and that will be automatic on your system. Okay. Individual sensors are nice as well, because then you know where is the plant taking water. In this particular example, in this soil moisture system, you can turn them off and turn them on. And this 4-inch sensor is the one down here. That's where all the activity is. The 8-inch sensor, it's drinking, it's working. The 12-inch sensor there's a lot happening. 20-inch sensor is a little bit flatter. That's this top one right here. And then 24-inch sensor is a flat line. So how deep are the roots? How deep are the roots? How deep are they drinking? I've got activity here, 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, and 24. How deep is the roots? The activity of the roots. Where's the activity at? Anybody? Shallower than 2024, isn't it? That's where the action is. So I need to be irrigating. So at this stage of growth, I need to be irrigating to that where those roots are at. So understanding that and understanding where I'm at on my chart, understanding my refill line and my full line. Does that make sense? So having a sensor that gives me a summary graph of the right sensors for when we're at what growth stage, and having one that has individual sensors is what I'm going to be looking at to schedule my irrigation. That make sense? Questions about any of that? I think everybody wants to have lunch. So appreciate your kind attention. I'll be around at lunch if you want to visit some more. So Kurt, you got some instructions on lunch?